Afternoon, everyone. I ate very well. I'm starting to feel it a bit. So I thought I might recline a little in this beautiful acquiescence post-lunch. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. One thing I did... One thing I did want to say, we've got some amazing videographers from Said and Done, Alana and Mikkel, who have been running around. Big round of applause. Colostomy bag fell off. I know how heavy cameras are because I carry them around for our crew, and they're doing a fantastic job. And also to Darren, who did a great job with all the photography as well. You'll see him, and yesterday wrangling all of you into a photograph. I don't envy that as a task. And can I say there's one little one who's here that I want to give a shout out to, little Olive. I think you might have heard some murmurings and some little chortles. Hello, Olive. I think she's crashed. Oh, she's over there. Yay, there she is. Yeah, at her first conference. We're going to get more of your buddies here next year or next time, definitely. Wow, I'm getting a bit melancholy because we're getting close to the final sessions. I was kind of getting wound up for the last 36 hours, and now we're sort of going down. So enjoy the next couple of hours while we're all together. And kicking off for this afternoon, we've got a great session called Engaging Consumers, Behaviours that Stick and Changes with Impact. Leading this discussion is Mandy Hall. What a powerhouse. How awesome is Mandy? Campaign Director at End Food Waste Australia. She's joined by a panel of experts who have dedicated their careers to understanding and influencing consumer behaviour. How that word has changed, influence, and then put an ER on it, and it's all very different, isn't it? We've got Dr. Angela Barker, Associate Partner at Whereto Research, Dr. Mark Boulet from BehaviourWorks Australia at Monash Sustainable Development Institute, Renee Prime, Behaviour Change Engagement Lead at Sustainability Victoria, and Toine Timmermans, Director of Food Waste Free United in the Netherlands, and pronounced with... Come on, talk it up. Took me 2 days, but I got it right. Together they're going to explore the complex world of consumer messaging, not texting, messaging. What are the messages that resonate? Which behaviours lead to long-term sustainable change? And most importantly, what practical steps can we take in our homes to meet the ambitious target of halving food waste by 2030? The panel will share insights and strategies. Please join me in welcoming Mandy to wrangle an awesome panel.
Thanks, Costa. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Look, a little impromptu discussion, I guess, before we start our wonderful panel. It is my great privilege to stand here today as an employee of End Food Waste Australia and as a director who leads a team of incredibly hardworking, passionate, committed people who are set to deliver what will be an Australian first, a nationwide consumer behaviour change campaign to tackle food waste in households. This campaign aims to unite us all in our efforts. One collaborative voice, that word has been used a lot, but that is certainly the case. One collaborative voice to tackle food waste in households. One collaborative voice to speak to all Australians. It is born from extensive stakeholder consultation and learnings. It is built on a foundation of exceptional research by the End Food Waste Australia CRC and designed with a strategy steeped in evidence, behavioural science and outstanding creativity. It is a vital opportunity for all levels of government, from local councils, for every state and territory, the federal government, along with industries and associations, to come together and speak with great strength as one. and provide a relatable, doable solution for all Australians. There is no doubt you will have heard over the last few days that we need to move a nation, and we cannot do that alone. Your support is vital. Your partnerships will be the difference that ensures success and an enduring campaign and enduring change. And whilst I'm here, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our federal funding partners, the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, DECU, because there is no way I could speak to you in this room without dropping an acronym or two, awarded our organisation the grant for the seed funding for this nationwide campaign. The federal government supports and recognises this consumer campaign as an independent voice and a vehicle for collaboration and unification in Australia, as a campaign to create history and, most importantly, to create vital change and make enormous impact. This is a campaign for the people. You've heard this said many times in the last 2 days. This food waste problem is complex, it is big, it is wicked, it is an infuriating, annoying beast of a ridiculous problem, but it is solvable. Yet despite all of our best intentions, our efforts over many years, food waste in households is not going away. Should we accept that it's human nature to waste food, or is there anything else that we can do to motivate people to change their behaviour? Is it possible to turn food waste around? Why isn't helping save the planet enough? Why is the fact that over 3 million households struggle to put food on the table enough? Why isn't the incentive to save $2,500 enough? So maybe it's not what we're saying that's the problem, but how we're saying it and where we're saying it. Because the reality is, for most of us here, we live and breathe this every day, but Australian households don't. Most are not aware of their personal contribution, and we know for sure that blame, shame, and burden are the enemy of solution and change. Even though food waste is incredibly important and a priority to all of us here, households around Australia are facing their own challenges. Every day they are bombarded with pressure to do this and to not do that, and we do not need to add to that pressure. It is my belief that the success lies in the creation of a movement rather than a typical campaign. A movement from the ground up, a movement that does not preach, instruct, burden or guilt households. A movement that doesn't make the much needed behaviour change feel like a chore, but to be something positive, relatable and empowering. Something easy. Something that can even be a source of pride for Australians to own and to talk about. And whilst I can't reveal much more about the campaign, when we launch the consumer campaign, it is important to remember that change does not happen overnight. It is important to know we must measure, use the science, be relatable, solutions focused, but most importantly, be in this together. With your support and an open mind, we can find ways to reduce household food waste, because I am absolutely convinced it is not an insurmountable task. Thank you. And while alongside me I have some amazing people that I would like to introduce you to who have joined us in this vital crusade and can definitely shed light on the messaging that we need to reach a nation. Can I first welcome Dr. Angela Baker. Angela is a skilled research, analytics and insights specialist focusing on cutting through the complexity of market research reports. Trained as an evolutionary biologist, she has worked as an academic in Australia, Canada and Finland, working across teams to drive data and experimental approaches to develop solutions and solve problems. She is a self-proclaimed data and information junkie, but believes the most exciting part is figuring out what to do with it all. Please welcome Dr. Angela Baker. And no stranger to most of us in the room is Dr. Mark Boulet, or should I say the End Food Waste Australia inaugural award-winning Dr. Mark Boulet. Mark has keenly been involved in behavioural focused research of household food waste for nearly 10 years. He's worked with organisations such as Sustainability Victoria, OzHarvest, New South Wales EPA, providing research insights and support for the design and implementation and evaluation of their different food waste related behaviour change campaign. Mark is currently the behavioural advisor to the End Food Waste Australia team and is assisting us in developing the nationwide consumer behaviour change campaign to reduce household food waste in Australia. Please join me in welcoming Mark. Renee Prime is the Behavioural Change Engagement Lead in Sustainability Victoria's social impact team, promoting circular behaviours with a focus on reducing food waste at home. With over 10 years' experience in marketing and in behaviour change, she is dedicated to creating impactful campaigns that inspire positive environmental action. Please welcome Renee. And last, but certainly not least, Toine Timmermans. Most of you will have seen Toine speak over the last few days. Toine is a global leader in food waste management and is active globally in creating impact on food waste prevention via research. Toine is currently the Program Manager of Sustainable Food Change in the Netherlands, Coordinator of the European Union Food Waste Project Refresh, and is the Managing Director of the Foundation Against Food Waste. Please welcome Toine. It goes without saying that I am in the most impressive of company, and now a bit of time to chat. So where do we start? I guess, Ange, I'm going to start with you. As a research and insight specialist, what types of consumer data have you found most valuable in understanding food waste?
Thanks, Mandy. For me, coming into a space where I'm trying to understand consumer behaviour, it's obviously going to be a mix of different types of data. So quantitative data or survey data. I tend to be more of a quant. You heard I'm an evolutionary biologist in training. We use a lot of quant data in studying evolution. So I like the survey data, the quant data, with a problem where we're actually trying to understand what motivates people and what are their barriers, what are their motivators. Qualitative data becomes really important as well. One of the things that I've seen in the work we've been doing in ending food waste is ethnography, in going into people's homes and talking to them, doing real ethnography. It's really quite shocking when you have them open up their kitchen caddy and you see that actually they're throwing out edible food. It's that kind of in-house, community research qualitative data as well. And in my mind, what completes that trifecta would be some of the data that people have talked about in the last couple of days around looking at the bins and seeing what people are throwing out. So that kind of trifecta of survey data, in-home exposure or in-home observation, and then actually seeing what's happening, because we've also heard over the last couple of days that what people say they do isn't necessarily what they actually do.
Great. Mark, drawing from your, over a decade of experience in food waste research, I know Craig touched on a few behavioural items yesterday, but what are the most effective approaches to creating lasting behaviour change in households? Big question, I know.
How long have I got? And we'll probably dive more into this with the contributions of others as well. I did want to just take a little step back and just talk about, three fundamentals to have in mind when thinking about consumers and thinking about behaviour. Obviously relevant to food waste as well as relevant to anything to do with people and the things that they do. And I think it consolidates and corrals some of the stuff that's been talked about with regards to behaviour over the last few days. And I'll be really quick, I promise. This is not me starting a lecture.
Got 28 minutes
Thank
and
you.
30 seconds.
The first is that motivation/intention is not behaviour. We often talk about we need to motivate people to engage in this. Motivation might lead to a greater intention to do something, but there is a thing called an intention-action gap, which I'm imagining a number of you have heard about, which prevents motivation or intention of translating into behaviour for a variety of reasons, right? And that's the first kind of fundamental to think about, and it's something we thought about a lot when it came to the design of the national campaign. And the reason there's this gap, and this is the second point, is that there's a whole spectrum of both internal and external factors that influence both consciously and unconsciously the way that we behave. When we talk about our own stuff, it's the skills, our attitudes, our values, the time we have, all the things that make us who we are, that influence or prevent us from engaging in behaviours. And then externally, it's retail environment, it's our home environments, it's all these sort of things that the physical environment or the social environment exerts on us that either help or prevent motivation from translating into action. And part of the role of behavioural science is to unpack what those are and to think, well, how may they be relevant for a campaign? And the third fundamental, and it's really a reminder to us in these rooms when we're engaging with people out there, is you are not your target audience. I often say this to groups, you're the weird ones when it comes to issues like food waste. And you say, no, I'm not. And I say, well, you spent 2 days in a room without windows talking about food waste. You're not normal, right? So what motivates you and what changes your behaviour when it comes to food waste is not probably what's going to motivate the groups of people you're engaging with. I love the fact that in a 2-day summit on food waste, every presentation we start by earnestly reminding ourselves that 1/3 of all food that's produced on the planet is lost or disposed, right? That's what motivates us. That's why we're here. But that might not necessarily be the messages that cut through or necessarily the kind of things that consumers need to actually change behaviours to avoid food waste. Rant over. Back to you, Mandy.
No rant. That was great. Thanks, Mike. Renee, in your experience, what have proven to be the most effective in cutting through the noise and reaching consumers when we're talking about food waste?
I think when it comes to messaging, there's 2 elements. So it's what's actually said and how it's delivered. So just in the context of what's happening at the moment, obviously highlighting cost savings and loss aversion, particularly as families are assessing their outgoings and where they can cut costs. That's one that we found really effective. Our researchers found talking about avoidance in the complete form, it just doesn't land, so we need to steer clear of that, and it's about making those small changes that add up to have a big impact. Also just having practical tips which people can action almost immediately, but weaving in some novel things as well, so just some novel hacks that we've found along the way to try and cut through what can sometimes be a little bit dry, the messaging that we're trying to get across. And just in regards to influencers or social media creators, we've just found they've had such a big impact in adding them to our mix of ways that we try and reach people. People kind of underestimate their ability to connect with audiences. Not all of them are trying to sell useless products, makeup, whatever. Some of them really do want to do good. So we found that getting content that sways people, influencers already have an established community. They already have established connections. They've got trust with all their followers, and their followers of followers. So establishing good relationships with influencers who do want to share, the good attention, create good attention around food waste and reducing food waste. It's really become invaluable to us.
Fantastic, thank you. Toine, what innovative approaches have you seen internationally that we could perhaps adopt or look at in Australia?
Of course, many. Good question. I've been around a while in this area, and I guess it's not about just 1 or 2 or 3 innovations. It's about this longevity, and it's about making sure that you got create a whole movement. Mm-hmm. Exactly as you were explaining in the beginning. That's the only thing that works. Yeah. As I explained yesterday, the Netherlands has done it based on science framework that we developed in an EU program, looking at different countries in Europe, and we see individual different drivers. Eastern Europe is totally different than Southern Europe, Western, etc. So building on that framework, where we looked at motivation, opportunity, and ability, so this whole skill set also, this gives a framework to design interventions. And the interventions you have to make simple and easy, and not too much at one time, but add them up, and then you see the change coming. After 5 years, we can see a reduction of 31%. So that's been also validated by research now. If you use the right context and tools and messaging and make it broad, so like we approach and reach all of the Dutch consumers, you get to about 25-30% reduction. That has proven, so you can use that model, and of course, make it fit the purpose to the Australian context. And what is relevant in that is, I thought about it also there, it's about amplifying the message, the positive message, the simple message, what consumers can do at home first. And having a week with 200 partners, all the retailers, the food service company, that made a difference to us, because then you will reach everybody. And then it's not about changing awareness only, but about action. So we know, because we kind of evaluate all the different actions and every year, and we do every 3 years a bin analysis, national scale. That's the only way to make sure that you're on the right track. So evaluate also always, so we can see the impact of all those actions, and that's so important. Not only just start, do, make it simple, amplify, and make sure that you reach people doing something. So we know, based on this evaluation, that last year 1/3 of the Dutch consumers, so that's 3 million, actually did something extra in that week, and that's what it is all about. Not so much talking, because it comes down to the nitty-gritty, because many people want to change their behavior. But it comes to the nitty-gritty, what does it mean to me? How can I actually do this? Understanding what we talked about yesterday, that, and the same is in the Netherlands, 80% of consumers think they are not the one wasting, but their neighbors are wasting, and that's not true.
It's so true. Well, we found that for sure. Angela, how can businesses use consumer insights to design more effective food waste reduction strategies?
That's a question truly for a market researcher, because I'll just say collect more data. But I think, and Toine just sort of alluded to this a bit, you have to think about, well, where does what you do sit in their food preparation journey or life cycle? So consumers are going out, they're planning, some of them are planning, they're shopping, they're preparing food, they're storing food, and then they're disposing of food. So where are you intersecting with consumers in that planning or in that journey? And from there, thinking about, well, then how do I engage with consumers and understand what they're actually doing? It's one of, I think, we've talked a lot about data, and it's how do you make sure you're really understanding that? Even as a quant researcher, I'm saying, how do you do ethnography? How do you do co-design? How do you really get into the mindset of your consumers throughout that journey, and actually work with them to sort of co-design solutions, so that that's sort of a customer-led or a consumer-led focus.
Fantastic. Mark, back to you. And I know there are many, but can you share an example of a successful food waste campaign that you have worked on, and explain why it's been successful?
Sure, although maybe I should just have my friends from Harvest come straight up and do that for me. So a couple of years ago, we did some work together with Harvest, where they were interested in taking a behavioural approach to understanding household food waste and where they might be able to intervene in an effective way. And rather than, I guess, bring our own assumptions to the problem, we're really interested in trying to understand, well, what are the scope of behaviours that consumers could be engaging with? And so through a series of workshops and some literature review, we identified, I think it was around 20 to 25 different behaviours. And then the question for us really was, well, which of all those different things, which are the most impactful ones that consumers could engage with in terms of actually reducing household food waste? But also, it's all very well to think about impact, but it's not a bad idea to think about the ease of a behaviour and the likelihood that someone will take it up. And then the third thing that we wanted to think about was, well, we know that there's existing food waste campaigns out there. What are consumers already doing? And based on those three criteria, can we actually identify which are relevant behaviours for OzHarvest to tackle, based on impact, based on likelihood of uptake, and then based on current engagement from consumers. So that's where the Use It Up campaign really came from, because there was a series of behaviours around using up leftover ingredients, using up leftover meals, that were kind of fell into that ideal quadrant of being both impactful, being relatively easy to do, and not many people reporting on doing it. But before we rushed into then design of an intervention, what we wanted to do was not bring our own assumptions again to the issue, because we are not our target audience. And we really wanted to understand the behaviours from the perspective of householders, not food waste nerds, which is what again, I keep looking at the Oz Harvest guys. This is what we are, right? So what's going to motivate us? So we asked through focus groups and interviews, we actually tried to pull apart what could help people to use up and what prevents people from using up. And one of the things that came out was just obviously time poor and all those sort of things, but messy, badly organized fridges were another one. And that's really where the use it uptake emerged, was how do we not tell people about the problem of food waste? No one likes it, as Craig said yesterday. They all know it's bad. Just help them organise their fridge. And that was enough, and we've got the data, we've done the impact evaluation for participating households to be reducing food waste by about 40%. Right? It took us a while. It was evidence-driven. But most importantly, and this is what I loved about the fact that Oz Harvest were willing to go there with us, is that we put our assumptions about consumers to the side and let, in a sense, them direct us as to the shape and scope of the campaign.
Fantastic. Renee, I guess back to you. I know that you work tirelessly to tailor your campaigns to the different demographic groups to, ensure that you maximise impact. Have you got any examples of how you do that?
I was going to say according to Borg and Boulet, but we obviously utilise the amazing, the breadth of insights that are available to us from people like Mark, and the amazing work from the Fight Food Waste CRC to tailor our campaigns based on the personas that they've identified and which interventions would be best suited to cause change within that demographic. But as we've found out recently, like Australia is a majority migrant nation now. I think it's like 51% of Australians have either been born overseas or have a parent born overseas. So we can't be expected to have one campaign approach that's going to fit a bunch of different communities, and especially in Victoria, we're such a rich multicultural state. So we have to look at different approaches for all these different communities. So we've been working with our multicultural partner, and we have a multicultural advisory panel. So when we want to do some campaigning on a food waste topic, we'll reach out to the multicultural advisory panel and figure out which topics and what communities we should be targeting, and then we'll work out a different engagement plan for all the different communities. So for the recent I Love Leftovers challenge, we did some amazing work in the Indian community out in Officer, and we had a really amazing and engaged community leader there, and we had some events over the holidays with children and their parents, so about 60 people who just got together and was talking about food waste in general, but then was also hands-on in creating these amazing recipes from common leftover items in that community, so like lots of lentils, bread and things like that. They also co-designed some resources for us which were amazing, about some recipes that people could use in the community to use up the most wasted food items, and we also utilised channels that typically popular within that community, so utilising WhatsApp instead of traditional advertising channels.
Fantastic, a lot of work.
Yeah.
But brilliant outcomes.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, it's one of the things I think we're proudest of so far. Yeah.
Fantastic. Toine, the Refresh project in the European Union, how has that approached consumer engagement, and what lessons have you learnt from it?
Yeah, like I already mentioned, there came out a kind of model, and Refresh was all about building national voluntary agreements, including consumer-facing campaigns. So as a response and an outcome of that, I would say all EU countries have some kind of consumer campaign, but there's only very few countries that have like a coordinated campaign like we have in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. But now, since we have binding targets, everybody's looking at, okay, we should probably look at that model because we're not reaching the targets the way if we continue this way. That's also the reason why, and this is just published a week ago, we have put together, because we are all about sharing, what are the building blocks in the successful approach in the Netherlands, what are the type of things that worked for us, including how you can copy this. And interventions are very important in that model, besides the week. So we have this as a proven intervention. We have this now as a proven intervention, because I met with Ronnie 2 years ago in Brisbane, and she talked about the use it update. Said, okay, can we also test it out in the Netherlands? And we've done research this year based on a control group, etc. So validated group by the Dutch Nutrition Center, and since we had as team for last year using surplus, so we have every year a different team, and it was proven that already being very low at 33 kilo, still too high, but 3 kilo per person, this would add up 28% additional food waste reduction. So that proves that you need a range of interventions, focus on a specific area, and then it adds up to that at least 30% reduction. And I think these are the type of proofs that every country can utilize to get at least to the first 25-30%. We are now in the stage of designing the next step. So also there we need new research. So there's Erica van Herpen, she has designed the model also for our intervention work, is now working on a new program that's called From Excess to Enough. And there we do more the deep dive on specific group, looking at also other conflicting elements, for example, good provider identity, which for some groups is very relevant. So that will give us lead to the new interventions. But we know now that our next area will be focusing more on the, let's say, the food environment, so involvement of the retailers, the manufacturing, like the date labeling, because they will put it on the labeling. So that's an important step. And also the social norm development in specific target group. That's for us the next step to go to the next 10-15%.
Fantastic. Ange, back to you. Based on your experience, what are some of the most common consumer misconceptions when it comes to food waste, and who do they think is responsible?
The biggest one is absolutely that their role is small, that individually anything they do has such a small effect it's not worth doing, and as a function of that, if you actually do a survey with typical Australians, they are significantly more likely to say that government and industry are more responsible for the problem, and government and industry are not doing enough. So they see their role as smaller, their impact as smaller, and their responsibility as lower, and think they are doing more than government or industry. So it's that kind of thing of, how do you actually teach people or educate people, encourage people, motivate people to think about every small change can make a difference. So that's a big one. Another one, which I'm sure Mark will talk more about, is this sort of virtuosity that people apply to putting things in the worm farm or the compost bin or the FOGO or feeding the chickens or the pets. They don't see that as waste. And that's something, as this sort of movement develops, how do we encourage people to think about that in a slightly different way?
Yeah, the number of times then the conversations I've had where people have said, I don't waste food, my dog gets it. And, that edible food waste conversation is tricky. It's really tricky because people do believe they're doing the right thing in that instance. Mark, you and I have worked closely together over the last few months, and taking in, I guess, some of Angela's thoughts, you've worked as the advisor to the team to develop the campaign, and what key elements do you think we're incorporating into the campaign that will make a difference without giving too much away?
The campaign formerly known as. There's a couple of points, and one I want to go into in a little bit more detail, just because really it allows me to shoot down Costa, which has been a lifelong ambition of mine. Sorry, Costa. So the first, there was again, I like working in threes when I think about things, and there was sort of three main foundations that we brought to the campaign itself. The first was this shift from, I guess, talking about food waste at a broad level, and really articulating personal food waste footprints, and kind of puncturing that idea that it's not me, it's somebody else, or I do better than others, and really trying to, I guess, hone into you're wasting more than you think. to kind of raise awareness, not of food waste at a national level and the scale and scope of food waste, but really to raise awareness of an individual's food waste footprint. So that's really one thing that we wanted to bring, and I think is different probably to other campaigns that exist both nationally and internationally. The second, we wanted to lean into social norms and normalising this, but we wanted to do that a little bit differently. My concern with we waste enough to fill 5 MCGs, or there's 3 Sydney Harbours worth of this or whatever, or even Craig's table down Sydney, whatever the Burke Street equivalent
Pitt
of whatever
Street.
he did, you know what I mean, Pitt, that's the one. With the big table down, is that it normalises the problem, and it gets us to this thing where to be an Australian is to waste food, or to waste that amount of food, right? That's just a normal part of being an Australian. And it also feeds in that narrative about, wow, isn't Australia really bad, but I'm not. Often when you repeat the scale and scope of a problem, and that's not just for food waste, it's been found in other areas as well, you normalise that problem in people's minds, and they just think, this is just the way it is. There's nothing I can do. What we wanted to normalise was solutions, and particularly through being able to, from I guess the families we focus on, the people that are part of the campaign, they can be easily identifiable with some of those key consumer segments. So not the ex-Master Chef contestant, or the food waste, the foodie influencer or the celebrity chef, but the stressed out parent who's juggling kids and all the rest, and what do they do to reduce food waste? So we wanted to normalise solutions as opposed to problems, and really normalise through people that those main segments within society can identify with. And the third thing in the campaign, and this is very much, I guess, the ongoing work of the campaign, is to translate that motivation to action gap through timely tools and resources, like what Toine was showing before as well, through timely prompts and nudges and changes to physical, either retail or hospitality environments that support consumers in that motivation and intention to do something, to actually doing something as well. So that was something that we kept coming back to time and again in the campaign, Mandy, and that's certainly what we asked the different creative agencies who responded to that brief to really kind of hone in on as well.
It's super interesting that you would mention MasterChef, and there's this element of naivety on my part, in that it was really important to me, way prior to MasterChef, that I worked in a space that could contribute to change, particularly change in food. And I remember coming out of MasterChef and working in, I'm going to say it's a Melbourne market, I think, and I thought I was so incredibly clever and was going to change the world, because I was making sliders of banana peel that I'd turned into an alternative to pulled pork. And it's quite the surprise to understand that actually isn't going to shift the dial, you know, and that most people aren't at home shredding their banana peels and turning them into pulled pork. So, however, I still live by that. One day, you know, I'll get it over the line. But yeah, you really are naive to the enormity or the ridiculousness of really how simplistic those changes need to be to shift the dial to move a nation. You know, you think it's, you know, we're all at different levels, and you're right. Those of us who are massive foodies are thinking of very different ways in which to avoid food waste. But, you know, we really do need to take that burden away and make it very simple for an Australian public, and that's what this is all about. Renee, I'm going to move on to campaign measuring. So can you share some insight on how you successfully measure your campaigns?
Sure. So it is a bit of a hot topic, and obviously today and on this panel, self-reported data isn't always the best in terms of identifying what is really happening, but sometimes it's all that's available to us for a range of different reasons. So we utilise that for a lot of our pre and post-campaign evaluation. And then in terms of campaigns, we measure interventions, like our challenge was related to like a lot of acquisition and getting participants. So we'll measure acquisition and retention and just general consumer performance, standard of the materials and how engaged they were throughout the whole process, and whether they would recommend it to someone, because that seems to be a really significant indicator of whether someone would come back and do the same challenge again year after year. And then also campaign performance metrics such as, reach, awareness. Is our message getting cut through? Do people actually, they've heard the message, but do they understand it? That kind of thing that we find is most valuable.
Thank you. I know we're running out of time, so I'll try and get in as many questions as we can before we finish. But Toine, in your experience, how important is the collaboration between different sectors, government, business, academia, in creating that impactful consumer behaviour change?
Otherwise, you don't have to start.
Yeah.
If you don't collaborate. And they all have a different role to play, of course. But we have to look at involvement of industry, and the whole supply chain, that's crucial. Government has a role to play, but mostly I would say funding. If you look at what they're doing in the Netherlands, they're funding it. For the rest, they're doing nothing. But that's not important, because that's what we need. Public funding related to a campaign is essential, because you cannot expect from companies they will run a public campaign on doing something that is a shared and a societal issue. And of course, what I said already mentioned, start with good science, but the practitioners, they need to do it. And that's different type of people. So you need a whole range of, let's say, people that have different background, different experience, and can translate what is learned in the frameworks, and that will go slow, into practical interventions that's much more dynamic. And you need the people that can connect those. That's probably one of the challenges, and I think, Mark, you're doing a great job here, being also the connector to the practitioners that actually design the interventions. And like you're also doing, using the creative agencies and the marketers to make something big. And but I guess the essential thing, and that's what we did in the National Week, create also some kind of competition. So our retailers are competing to be on the public channel, media channel, with their action. So there will be hundreds of actions, but they're all competing for who will be the biggest, who will get the most attention, and that makes life easy for us. So make it positive, make it something that will help to the positioning of the brands and the industry, and then it will just go. But make it positive.
Yeah.
And make it an umbrella that everybody feels comfortable to connecting this. What we always say, our food waste free campaign is owned by industry, not by government, not by us, it's owned by industry.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and certainly the research tells us that that's the path that we need to take. We have a minute left, and Mark, I'm going to throw this probably last question to you. What do you believe are the top 3 behaviours
Come on.
that consumers could adopt to significantly reduce their food waste at home?
And you've given me 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is be a behavioural scientist and just look smug at you and say it depends on the consumer and it depends on the household. So it's tricky. I mean, we do know, that the CRC work has been fantastic in identifying sort of the 7 behaviours with regards to impact, behaviours to do with planning, behaviours to do with storage. Have a look at some of the CRC work. They list those. They'll be featured in the campaign. And they kind of give us a good average about what the behaviours are, but it really does depend on the consumer and the household and the particular dynamics and makeup of the household. So I get a little bit hesitant about identifying 1 or 2, but we did identify 7, and in 3 seconds left, Google them.
It's quite, I don't know, for those of you who have not sat on stage, there's a huge countdown clock here. And all I can do is think about everybody in my life, personally and professionally, who would wish to have one of those around when I'm in a room. I'm sure our CEO, Stephen Lappage, is going to order one for his office for every time I walk in there. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I think, we could talk for hours. It's a really, really imperative and interesting topic. I could talk about the campaign all day, and hopefully for many years to come, we will be doing that. Please, everyone in the room, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to these incredible colleagues of mine. They're certainly a joy to work with, and have helped inform what I believe and what we all hope to be the biggest changing campaign in our nation in terms of consumer food waste. So thank you, everyone, and I'll see you on the way out.